And we're live, folks. We're live.
Hello, everyone.
I felt like I was only here yesterday doing the same thing, but not talking about the budget. So we'll just wait for a few people to hop online, and we'll get the party started. Yeah. I feel like it's a bit slow to start. There's a few viewers there. Smash up the likes and give us a comment when you can see us. And,
A little bit like the budget, a little bit slow.
A bit like a politician in that way. But yeah, we'll wait for everyone to start coming online, and we'll do a bit of an introduction for those that don't know who you are. Cool. I think we came on a little bit early. Hey Nora, hope you guys are doing well. All right, let's get started. So we've got Ridhwan here, Ridhwan Hannan from One Path Accountants. Thanks for
having me.
Yeah, thanks, mate.
Good to see you again.
And got, I don't know, like about this budget, eh? I was going to say we've got lots of cool things to talk about. I might play a little video to get started, just to start the party. I've got a video, and this is sort of what the budget reminds me of when I saw it. So
free fries when you get vaccinated.
Right. This is sort of what the budget reminds me of, right?
I got vaccinated. You're saying I could get these delicious fries? My man. But there's also a burger element to this. Let me check with Bill Neathart. Is it too early in the day to eat a burger? No. This could be breakfast? Okay.
It's pretty healthy. Burger and fries. You want to be healthy, get a vaccine.
Again, some people love hamburgers, some don't. Really want to respect all ways of life. But if this is appealing to you, just think of this when you think of vaccination. Vaccination. I'm getting a very good feeling about vaccination right this moment.
This is a bad shot. It's like me in the back video.
The U.S. government can't go back.
So I just don't know, like the vaccine, the hearts, all cholesterol, who knows, right?
We're talking about the budget.
We're here to talk about the budget, right? But just, we can never forget about the rulers, right? We're sitting here and people are like, inflation's bad and the world's bad and we want a saviour to come and get us. And they're hoping that some commie from the government is going to sit there and give them a golden pill to resolve all their issues, right? But none of it's going to go away. I've got a second video to show everyone. It's only a 1 minute video.
Okay.
And it really hits home who's in control, right? Because it ain't these fellas, right? So this is the second video, and I showed this one last night when I did my Facebook Live. I'm going to make this as like my video of the year, I think, because this is really funny, right?
Because we can print our own money.
It obviously begs the question.
This
why
guy
exactly
here
are we borrowing in a currency
is
that
Joe
we print ourselves?
Biden's economic
I'm waiting for
advisor.
someone to stand
This
up
guy-
and say, why do we borrow our own currency in the first place?
Like you said, they print the dollar. So why does the government even borrow?
Well, again, some of this stuff gets, some of the language that some of the language and concepts are just confusing. I mean, the government definitely prints money, and it definitely lends that money, which is why the government definitely prints money, and then it lends that money by selling bonds. What they do?
Is that what they do?
I'm watching this video.
They sell bonds. Yeah, they sell bonds.
Right?
Since they sell bonds and people buy the bonds and lend them the money. Yeah. So a lot of times, at least to my ear with MMT, the language and the concepts can be kind of unnecessarily confusing, but there is no question that the government prints money and then it uses that money to I guess I can't really talk. I don't get it. I don't know what they're talking about. Like, cause it's like the government clearly prints money. It does it all the time and it clearly borrows. Otherwise we wouldn't be having this debt and deficit conversation. So I don't think there's anything confusing there.
That's ludicrous. His
name's Sharon Bernstein. He's like the economic advisor for Joe Biden, right? And it sounds like there's two parts to it. One's like, oh yeah, I don't know what's going on, right? It's like these people are mentally incapacitated. Second thing is it also sounds like when they're selling Aerotide International on Wall Street, right? Oh, I think I think the mum answers the phone. It's a lovely lady, right? And it's like, come on, that's the fucking rulers of the free world. That's the free world that everyone believes that they live in. And that's their leaders that are out there, right? That video, I thought it was a piss take. I thought it was like a comedic sketch to start
That's the
off
first
with.
time I've seen it. It looks like it's, I can't believe that went to air.
Yeah, but then I went onto the news and typed his name in. His name's Jared Bernstein, and typed in news, and it's on Daily Mail, which is mainstream media, saying that the financial guy doesn't know what he's talking about, right?
Wow.
And that is your system. And everyone's sitting here thinking, oh, is the budget going to save me?
It's not
the
going
inflation.
to, let you know.
And I tried looking for something of substance, and it sounds like, oh, we're going to give you a bunch of fries and a hamburger, go sell your soul, right? What are we sitting here looking at? They're going to give you $300. Dr. Jim Chalmers, whatever his name is, Jim's going to give you a Jimmy, right? $300 off your electricity, but what's $300 going to do you? What's it get you? Maybe half dozen massages, right?
75 a quarter.
75 a quarter. Every quarter you can go get yourself a massage, folks, right? In whatever capacity that must be. Jimmy's giving out free Jimmies, right?
It's
That's
not health or financial advice.
not health advice, not financial advice. And we can make jokes about these folks that are, giving this, rhetoric out there. Everyone's thinking, oh, wow, I'm going to get $300 for my life. You ain't going to do shit, right? I ain't going to get you a burger and chips. I went out and had lunch/dinner before, and I got 2 salads. You know how much the 2 salads cost me from the health food shop there?
Easy $38.
$48. You got $48, $24 a salad, right? I was trying to be a bit healthy. Put on a couple of kilos the last few days, so I was like, better, keep being healthy. So no one's coming to save you, right? What's fucking $300 going to do, right?
Yeah, look, I think that the wide consensus from all the economists, accountants, anyone in the financial space has labelled a nothing budget, which is interesting because last time we were at budget time, this time last year, they also labelled a nothing budget. So it's 2 nothing budgets in a row, and I think what Labor's banking on is that some sort of cost of living relief, I should say, is going to be the changing, tide of the polls. I don't know. I think it's going to be a tough one.
I was hoping we'd see some ATO remission of fines and penalties for everyone, so all our friends get free tax. But there's nothing fun in there. There's not,
actually, to be honest with you. And there's one notable exclusion. So Nathan actually made a prediction, and I sometimes bring up your predictions, is that I think we're in peak COVID. So it was like May 2020 or May 2021. I can't remember which budget it was. We have it somewhere on film. Mm-hmm. And you were talking about getting a JobKeeper tattoo. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I was going to get JobKeeper. I've got no tattoos, folks, right? And I don't profess to. Good luck if you have tattoos. But I joked about having JobKeeper and then Scammo at Frydenberg or whatnot. It was like...
So that live that we did,
pre-printing.
Right? You said, we were talking about the deficit. And then you go, Ridhwan, it doesn't actually matter. It's going to be $1 trillion in a few years. And we are at $934 billion.
And they're booked in for 1.2.
They're booked in for just over 1.1 in 2026, 2027. So under 2 years, we're booked in for 1.1.
I just don't understand, right? They've never said that they're saying, oh, we're in a surplus, we're in this. We ain't in no surplus. We've just taken out fucking $1.2 trillion worth of debt as a nation.
No, that's the gross aggregate debt, right? But if you look at it, you're absolutely right. They pitched a $9.3 billion surplus. But actually, when you take in the decline in receipts and contraction in the economy, in 2024-25, it's actually a $28.3 billion deficit. And it increases to another $46 billion in 2025-2026, right? So we're actually in effectively a deficit that's going in, but we've painted up pretty.
I've got a new job. Like when I've got a newspaper here, when this fella loses his career in the future, whenever it happens, right? Because we're all puppets. When he loses his career, he could choose to go on to one of those reality TV shows. He could go on to the Survivor, what do they call it? Like the Get Me, I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here. He could try that once his job's a wash up. Or he could go on to MasterChef and be a celebrity chef because this guy's trying to cook the fucking books. And how can they do it? They took $14 billion out of NDIS, right? I had someone ask me today, "Hey Nathan, what do you think of NDIS?" And I'm like, it's a scam, right? Anything you see scheme next to, you can just fix it up a little bit and call it a scam. These NDIS, there's these providers, everyone's building these NDIS houses and all this sort of stuff. It's the biggest Ponzi. It's the biggest Ponzi since I've seen NRAS. It's the biggest Ponzi since I've seen, granny flats and off the plan style things. It's just another big Ponzi, and they've now removed and pulled the rug of $14 billion. Why did they pull it? I ain't seen on the red headline, "Oh, he's taken away from disabled people" or anything like that. They probably will somewhere, but it just goes to show they're just flicking numbers around. It's all just an illusion. It's illusion of wealth. No one's got any wealth.
Yeah, look, I mean, the reality it's a little bit tangential to the budget, but NDIS obviously being funded by the federal sector is they're seeing a lot of waste. They're seeing a lot of frauding going on. They're seeing a lot of problems in the NDIS sector, and unfortunately not reaching those people it's meant to, and it's getting, the cream's being taken to the top. But we've seen this before. Whether it's anything else.
Bats,
yeah, right.
Whether it be NRAS, they're all schemes that...
They're all things that are meant to be somewhat beneficial for individuals who they're targeted to, or relief in terms of cost pressures, for example. We have the same thing here to some extent, but it's actually funneled through, in my opinion, less direct mechanisms and more through corporate infrastructure spending, et cetera, and we all know, unfortunately, in Australia, we've got a problem and we've got a little bit of an addiction to privatising everything. Sell a toll road to, Transurban, they basically apply a toll to it, we pay for it through the next 100 years, right? So I think there needs to be a fundamental shift in the way that the Australian budget is looked at. Obviously, the guys who prepare the budget and do everything, it's hard to balance everything. So I'm not trying to say that you or I have a better solution to this, but I think there are some key takeaways that they missed, which I'll share at the end. And I think that there will be things that get tabled quite soon, sooner rather than later, because these type of budgets I don't think will hold the test of time. So you had some really early budgets, key critical budgets back in the 90s and 2000s with the Keating and Howard and Costello era. They were actually pretty good. The introduction of GST, those type of things. We don't have any of those, I think, landmark type of policies anymore at the moment. We're just kind of putting the Band-Aid on, what you said is that they'll just keep having to dig in, spend, make it bigger. Now, Australia, in global terms, they're actually still pretty good in terms of where they are from a debt point of view. But unfortunately, places like America, where that debt spiral is so large, no one knows.
$34.5 trillion, 34 trillion, 700 billion, right? And the interest bill is racking up at $1 trillion every 90 days now.
Yeah, so it's, I just don't know. We don't know what's going to happen there. And obviously, if they take a big hit, they're going to take everyone with them. And obviously, we're, quite interconnected. And I think what we need to be aware of, as especially a lot of the clients that we engage with, property investors and people looking from an investment point of view, is earlier to what Nathan said, is that you do really, I guess, get a sense that you need to have a plan in place to be able to account for what would otherwise be independent income away from any sort of government support. In the US, they're projected to run out of Social Security by 2035 at the rate they're spending.
Yeah.
So self-funded retirees, which Australia has a majority of, is going to be the way forward, right? So relying on the age pension, it will continue to get defunded and it will continue to get devalued, because if you look at things like what they've done with job seeker, rent assistance, all those other different mechanisms where they pay you, they're not catching up to inflation or what they're trying to do to be able to plug a hole in the budget. They're actually winding it back and giving you somewhere else. So it's a little bit of smoke and mirrors that's going on, and they're targeting to particular voter types. So, for example, there was a HEX correction this year where HEX was going up by CPI. All the young people who typically vote, more left, more green, which is fine. They all put a big stink in about it. So basically they came in and said, okay, we're going to peg it to CPI or wage increases, whichever one is lower, right? So I think you have to take off your hat of, okay, what was on the paper and say, where is this headed? And I think that's the problem with this particular budget. Is it a bit of a nothing budget? Trying to say
off a cliff.
Well, not maybe that bad, but in terms of the key landmark parts of the budget, the biggest ones were, which they've put in the headlines and they've been marketing for the last 3 months, 4 months now, is the cut to income tax rates, which were what previously the stage 3 tax cuts, and they've dialed those back. So effectively, higher income earners don't get as large a tax cut. So you're looking at basically the people who are on the middle to lower end of the tax bracket getting the majority of the cuts, and the people who are on the highest, 180 plus 200, getting the least of the cuts compared to what they were. So effectively that middle bracket, which is 45 to 135, is now broadened up quite a lot, and it's at 30%, right?
So this year I can declare 100 grand income instead of 40 grand income.
So I think if you're in a position where you are in the middle to lower end of brackets, you'll find a change in your pay scale coming up 1 July. And just the quick numbers, if you're earning 150,000 or more, you get about $4,500 back in tax per year, right? So it's not the biggest thing in the world, nor is it the best thing in the world.
Yeah.
But I kind of look at it with what we've talked about previously is that if you're waiting for those type of mechanisms, then I think there's a problem, because if you're, let's just say, do numbers. If you're earning 150 grand and you're getting $5,000 as a tax cut, what's that in percentage? It's not much, right? A couple of percent?
3%.
If you're looking at rent, how much did they move in the last couple of years, right? If you're looking at interest rates, how much do they move if you have money in cash, for example? So I think that the mechanism that I think Australia's got wrong, or the budget has got wrong in this particular instance, is that they're looking at trying to spread it out, which is fine, but I think they're not looking at where it's coming from. So, for example, it's a little bit more, I guess, what's the word? Nathan uses the word all the time, commie, but it's not commie. It's more redistribution of wealth in the sense that
I've got a better way of saying it.
If you look at a couple of other countries where they tax resourcing right, they tax all those type of things right, then we would have less dependency on individual taxpayers pulling out this much money for the budget, right?
Yeah.
Taxing BHP, taxing, Exxon, taxing Santos, those type of things. And that conversation is coming up. But if you have a people's budget, you've got to give the people something. And that's, I think, the part that we're missing. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
I was going to say, I have another way of saying it. They're literally, some people say they're taking from Peter to give to Paul or whatever. Like, I've got to say, hey?
Don't say it.
Don't say, okay. I won't say it's very foul, it's very gross.
Yeah.
It's
robbing from Peter to pay Paul.
It's taken from the cat to give to the dog.
Yeah. So I think that's the fundamental part of what, as in my takeaway for clients is that, okay, great, you got a tax cut. What are you going to do with it, Nate? $4.5 grand, $3 grand, what are you going to do with it?
Like, it's just so minuscule, right? It's so minuscule. Like, it makes you sound good, right? And you're like, oh, I've got an extra $5 grand, right? And if I go back 10 years ago, $5 grand is a deposit for another property. But the thing is that we're in a world now where inflation is just so great. And they say that inflation is, we've got it under control at 2.5%. But they've taken everything out of it. They've stripped and hollowed that out. So it's no longer, they're not using coffee beans anymore. The coffee's been excluded from the CPI basket. They've taken meat out. They've taken out rent. They've taken out mortgages and swapped it with rent, right? So it's a CP lie. They're just cooking the book. So if you say $5 grand, right, I'd rather look at any of our investors' portfolios and think, okay, someone's got 10 properties. They've pushed up that rent by $50 to $80 per week on average. So $80 an average sort of rent increase for the last 12 months. $80 times 10 properties is $800. There's 40 grand a year. You've taken control in your own hands, right? You're not relying on the government.
Yeah.
But the government, if you go and research the Latin word and meaning of government, it stands for mind and control. So it's mind control, right? But they're the controllers. People looking to their oppressor for a saviour. Right? They're going to the government going, oh, please give me this. It's like, well, we're just going to steal a little bit less, right? But we've cooked the books elsewhere, and the hidden tax is the inflation, and that's what everyone should be looking at, in my view, is the inflation.
Yeah.
They don't care about the tax.
So
Charge
look,
me 100%, maybe not 100%, charge me 80% in tax per inflate the shit out of everything.
Yeah.
I'll do better. I'll create my own tax system by having inflation. So,
and I think the unfortunate part about this type of budget is it does little to help that middle sector. So you're looking at what otherwise is a tax cut for the middle sector, but in Australia, the middle sector is small businesses, truckies, people holding, signs, all those type of things. You're not looking at trying to stimulate that to a point where they're spending. It's actually where they're actually looking after themselves, investing, et cetera, et cetera. How many of your clients, how many of our clients, they're struggling to get not onto a property ladder for themselves, but just a property ladder because the funding costs of your life are so high at the moment, right? So that's the reality of what we've got here. So a couple of key landmark parts of the budget again were that it was considered a non-inflationary budget because the government actually departed from what the RBA said. So the government said that target inflation is going to come down between 2 and 3%.
Because they're killing the economy.
Well, and RBA said, well, no, actually, we think that rates are going to be staying high or high-ish because of inflationary pressures till the end of this year or till mid to early next year.
But they also said that in February 2019.
Yeah.
And then 3 months later, or 4 months later, we had the interest rates go down by 0.25%. That was the first part of our reverse monetary policy back in 2019.
Correct, yeah. So I think to some extent those type of measures and the call-outs they do, in the sort of accounting and economic space, everyone's looking at that as a way for the spending measures that are in this budget, whether it's childcare, whether it's housing, whether it's education, whether it's tax cuts, whether it's energy rebates, to try and offset that. That's the conversation, because they don't have to live up to that. That's a target. So as a good example to one target that they've put, they want to build 1.2 million homes in the next 5 years. So that's just around about 250,000 homes in every year.
Good
right?
luck. So they want to. I want lots of things in life. I could say things that are funny, right? But the reality is we want lots of things, right? But it's what we want and what is physically possible is that going to be in line.
Yeah. So I think at your end of year, or I think it was end of financial year, we had Simon on.
We had the
statistician.
Yeah, we had the
demographer.
The demographer. It was our sort of education.
Keynote speaker. Yeah. And he basically said, look, that target there is virtually unachievable. We've got less trades. We've got less people going into trades. And as a result of that, I think they've heard of that. They're actually putting $90 million to get a boost to the construction space. But the problem that we have for that, and what everyone doesn't really understand is that you don't just turn up to TAFE and then the next day you're a plumber, right? There's 4 years of all that type of stuff. So if you want to build 1.2 million houses in 5 years, when do you need those guys?
So how much was the money that they had
allocated for that?
Yeah.
So overall, for the last two budgets, it's been about 32 billion. This year's been on 6.2 billion top up for new home initiatives.
So 32 billion, 38 billion divided by 100.
No, just for this measure, it's 11 billion.
11 billion.
Yeah.
Divided by 1.2 million homes.
Yeah.
As Lisa said in the comment section, that's less than $10,000 a house. They'll be lucky to buy 10, right? So, but
that's the measures. I mean, Lisa's absolutely right.
Let's just break that down, right? That's how fucking stupid and bad these communist, totalitarian, fascist entities that we bow down to and forced to respect via due force to ourselves. If we don't comply, they will come with force at us, right? Would that be fair to say? It'd be fair to say that they come to us with force if we don't comply to them.
So it might not be nice, yeah.
Exactly, right? And they're telling us all these things, but when you question it and you break it down, most people are like, oh yeah, what's in it for me? And they'll go, I got $300 off my electricity bill, let's go down to the massage once a quarter and get ourselves jimmied by Jim, right? And no one's sitting there calculating like Lisa just has and said there's 10 grand per thing. That's disgraceful.
So I think, Lisa's right, and I think there's a lot of smoke and mirrors in some of these elements, and that's why again it's a bit of a nothing budget. I think what is key, which I think one of the Deloitte economists said yesterday when I was watching the budget, was pretty key. She said that migration has been underpinning this budget for the last couple of years and this economy for the last couple of years, and that's set to halve. It's still reasonably high.
It's set to halve when?
Next year, right? So
after we let the half a billion people in, we'll let another
250,000. Yeah, but
we'll
up until that point,
we'll let another 500,000 people in.
Look, from a property investor's point of view, it's a good thing. But from a budgetary point of view, we're going to start to reduce those target inflation numbers. Are going to, effectively be reached because the economy is going to splutter to a halt. In this budget, there's been very little said about two things: debt and consumer spending, because they are pretty much, they're off the edge of a cliff, right? So what's not said sometimes is the key parts to look at and what's said. And the reason for that is that if I can distract you with all the little bits and pieces of what I'm saying,
They'll ask any questions.
you don't have to ask any questions and you don't have to worry about what's going on.
I actually saw, like, I know when I go through, I'm like, okay, where's there a little infrastructure project where some pals of, these guys are, funneling money to some of their supporters or whatever, right? Or their whoever, right? I couldn't find anything there. There was nothing in there. There was nothing in there. The only one that I did see, and I've never heard anyone talk anything about, was that they say that employers that pay super at the same time that they pay wages, which is like single touch payroll.
Yep.
But then there was the tax earnings on super fund balances. So if you have over $3 million, they've now increased the tax from 15% to 30%. So they've literally just stolen your super. They're stealing from your super fund. Yeah.
Yeah.
You work
So
hard,
that's
try and look after yourself. You
It's-
get robbed.
highly contentious space, which is because the idea of super is that you self-fund, we're out of the picture
Until they want to.
until they want to do this, which is, really, I think, a problem because over the last 10, 15 years, everyone's been contributing to super like crazy.
Yeah.
As we know, we've got clients with self-managed super funds, we've got clients who've got retail funds, we've got clients who've got all different types of defined benefit funds, and everyone wants to contribute to that because when you get to that point, you've worked hard there, you're meant to get that tax-free. Now they're saying, well, you don't need that much money, and the problem is that those caps that they've got don't account for, well, they do account for, but in my opinion, they don't account for what would be the devaluation of the currency, right? So if you've got to pull your super out and buy your kids a house and a flat in wherever, Parramatta, Blacktown costs $1.3 million because now at the moment it's $700,000.
Yeah.
And that might be in 10 years' time.
Yeah.
You just lost half your super, right? So the problem with those type of caps, as you said, is that there's sort of an ever-moving goalpost, and that's why more and more it's important that you make sure it's the right opportunity for you, and then you're in a position where you're actually controlling it yourself.
And they say, we've given money to childcare. Childcare workers currently earn $23 an hour will get a boost to their wages. That's what they put in there, right? It's like, they did a good job the other year when they said everyone gets 100% childcare or whatever, because then now they can force the second person in the household, i.e. the wife, the mother of the child, to have to go back to work straight away, so then she can be on the tax slave wagon and have to pay taxes again. So they've got more income coming through from, the more that this is the other thing that is not in the budget. One thing I haven't seen in the budget is the fact that people are now being pushed to do a second job, a third job, a weekend job, the wife working, the kids working at 6 years old, just to be able to, I'm joking about the last
I
one.
actually have a lot of clients who are taking up second jobs.
So they're taking second jobs just to get by. So what does that mean to their income? Their revenue is increasing because of the level of activity that is happening there. But they ain't talking about, hey, we've got some extra money in our pocket because of that.
Yeah, no, sure. And look, I think that's the telltale sign of this budget in the sense it's under the covers inflationary and doesn't have a huge amount of inward receipt change in terms of what they're doing. There was no discussion of changing corporate tax for minors, right? Like it's just zero. Like they could just literally, there was no discussion of GST. They could have GST on luxury goods go from 10% to 15% or 20%, for example, identify a pool of luxury goods, handbags, watches, all those other type of things that people spend money for. So I think it's a very strange, but it's just a very weird nothing budget that they're trying to hope and get through to the next election, which is in a year.
$300, like seriously, it's an insult. And you see all these people online, and they're like, "Oh, but what's that? Gina Reinhardt, she's a billionaire. She's going to get $300." Like, he's a fuck. Right? It's $300. It's like, oh, here's your joint, your dollar change. Oh, no, I'll leave it on the table. Right? That's the level, and it's sad that we're sitting here joking about $300, right? Because inflation is so fucked, and it's going to get a lot worse. It's no different than, oh, we'll give you a bunch of fries and a burger if you go get vaccinated. It's like, in what world is that helping your health?
No, and look, and I think that the corollary of that is that instead of giving us all $300, why don't we tax the miners accordingly and then redistribute that? Because unfortunately, the way that the economy and the political landscape is set up, you just don't get that. So I'm not a person that's saying go out and tax the miners at, $100.
I'm not either, because I do quite well out of the minors, may I just say.
But there is a balance, right? So any of you guys ever, I'm sure you've seen it all over TikTok. Punter Politics is actually a really smart, intelligent guy, if you look him up, he'll tell you exactly what, or he'll give you a bit of an insight exactly why there's a bit of an undercurrent going on about how to tax accordingly or appropriately rather than trying to squeeze individuals, or in this case, sort of placate the individuals because there's so many other cost pressures that are coming up. So going back to what we're talking about, one of the parts that were not talked about in the budget was debt continues to rise, failing to peak over the next forecast period. So gross debt is projected to reach 934 billion, which is about 33 or 34% of GDP in 2024-25, relatively unchanged from the previous update, but gross debt fails to peak in the forward estimates, reaching over 1.1 trillion or 35% of GDP in 2027-2028. So I correct myself from previously. So the problem with that is that if you don't have a mechanism to bring that debt down, you've only got one mechanism left:
Print.
more tax or print, right?
Print.
And so I don't think that in a situation where property's been going really well, share market's been going pretty well, people's incomes are sort of going up, there's more employment, we've got the lowest employment for 50 years, or as close to low employment for 50 years, but this thing is still going up.
Yeah.
It's not going up a lot, but it's still going up, right? And I think that's the critical element which we need to tackle from a budgetary point of view to be able to actually deliver some sort of relief in terms of cost of living and interest rates.
Well, Jim giving Jimmy's away is trying to cause relief in different ways, right? It's when you say the $1 trillion of debt, right?
Yeah.
Like I always say $1 trillion of debt. I always say $1.2 trillion of debt is where we're heading to. When we think about that, it's like, oh, it's just become a normal thing. We can just talk about like, oh, it's just $1 trillion worth of debt the country's in. Up until it took 200 years of the US economy to get to $1 trillion worth of debt, right? And it got there in the turn of this century. Right?
Yeah.
That was only 25 years ago. And then it's doubled every sort of 5 years, right? It's doubling and doubling and doubling. So if we're sitting here going, fuck it, no one even talks about how we're going to pay off $1.2 trillion worth of debt. There's no strategy around it. There's no way to get out of debt. The question I ask is who is the debt to, which I know where it's the debt's to. We could listen to that flop that we're listening to at the start before, and we borrow money and then we die. But as a matter of fact, I don't know, right? They're printing bonds and they're selling those bonds off as a derivative to poor suckers being other nations, and creating this big Ponzi scheme. They're printing out debt to cover the interest bill on their current debt in this whole process, right? And it's just a big fat Ponzi scheme, and the money is losing its value. So the more debt that's accruing, the quicker that this is rising now. And like the US interest every 3 months is the size of our whole debt here. But 25 years ago, the US was only $1 trillion worth of debt.
Yeah.
Right? We're going to end up in a point when we lose our currency, like the US is losing their currency, that this is just going to implode.
Look, I think we're in a much better position than the US for two factors: is our debt load is much lower, and the but part of it is that property is just sky high, right? So then if you're going to continue to have property being that expensive, what happens is personal debt continues to rise to be able to account for that, and then you've got to have effectively the governments come in and say, okay, well, how can we support that? We've got to keep interest rates low. We've got to have the economy going poorly. The only way you can do that, deflate, print, get your way out of it, right? So there's too many levers that are going there at the moment, but I think that's kind of why this budget is so nothing, right? There's no, even if they said, what, we're increasing taxes, you and I would be sitting here saying why they've increased taxes, what for, right? And if they said that we need to have budget repair or we need to be in a position, but they can't because the cost of living is so high that to do that would be political suicide, and it might be financial suicide for, I shouldn't say that, financial, disaster for a lot of people.
It's suicide for a lot of people.
So I think that's the conversation we're not having, and I think that's really what this budget is about. What we're not being told, what we're not talking about is the problems that we're not tackling, right? So if you want wages to continue to rise, you need what? You need small business to thrive, right? Virtually no measures in the budget for small business. There's some electricity relief. There's some instant asset write-off, which is continuing. It's not been increased.
Yeah,
it just hasn't performed.
So just so some of you that are tuning in now, you might be like, who's my friend here today? This is Ridhwan Hannan from Empire Accountants. If you need an accountant, make sure you put him up and send us a message, or there's a link in the description, send us a message and get in contact with Rid. I forget where I was going with that. I had something in my head. I sound like that dumb. What did you say just 2 seconds before?
I said in terms of what they're trying to do.
Oh, yeah. Okay. What the question I was going to ask you is, you deal with lots of our investors, right?
Yes.
So with all the people on your team, right? This is just important for everyone watching this, right? If you want to have a good business, you have the people that are in sync to be the best key people to get you to where you want to be. If you have an accountant that most of their clients only have 1 or 2 properties, then you're screwed, right? You're going to be getting the advice on having a 1 or 2 property portfolio. If your accountant has, average client has 10, 15, 20, 30, 50, 100 properties, then you're going to be getting the advice, structuring, and all that sort of stuff from someone that's experiencing with it every day. And you need to have the same thing around you, whether it be finance or legal or buyer's agent or whatever the case, or property manager, whatever the case may be. But you look after our investor clients, but you also look after other people that aren't investors, are like business people, white collar workers and stuff like that. I do have a question without going too deep into the general populace, right? Because I have so much data that is at my fingertips, right? I have tens of thousands of people, interactions that I have contact with on a daily basis, and conversations I have with them, and they might tell me, but I'll see if they're like going well or if they're going bad, right? And I see where the opportunities are and where they're really killing it. From like a bit of a litmus test from overall, what are you seeing with small businesses out there? Like, what are some of the struggles that people are saying? What are some of the things that you see as a business that you can share? Like without going
Absolutely. So I think there's a two-folded or 2 parts to this. One is that small businesses are like everyone else. They're mums and dads, they're individuals, they're people who have left their corporate jobs. They're not some sort of weird other sort of cohort of the economy or the population. They're just people like you and I, right? And they're facing all the different challenges of cost pressures. They're facing different challenges of resourcing in terms of staffing, because it doesn't actually translate immediately. But for example, if you've got a really good staff member and he or she says, "Hey, Nathan, I need to get a second job, so I need to take Fridays off because I've got to work Friday, Saturday, Sunday. It's the only way I can get a job, and I'll work for you Monday to Thursday." That impacts you. So what you would probably do is say, "Well, how much is your second job paying? It's a couple $100. Let me see if I can give you a pay increase, etc., etc." That upstream cost that you've got to take on comes out somewhere, right? And the reality of it is that all the small businesses that we handle, and it's a bit of a have and have not. Some of them who are in industries where they're government funded or co-government funded, contractors and whatnot, they're writing checks, the governments are paying them, right? But where you're looking at an individual, shops, food, pool cleaners, all these other normal types of industries, they're just lawnmowers. They're just really in a position where they go, "I've got to hang on for dear life because I hope." Well, you said a thing is that I hope the government will save. No, the government will save me with something, right?
Yeah.
And so they're hanging on to clients. They're trying to get more clients, but it's tough, right?
They can't increase their fee because the client
fees.
can't even pay them.
That's right, but then they have to because costs are going up, right?
Yeah.
So it's really difficult. For them to understand how it is that you could even conceptualize another interest rate rise.
Yeah.
Right? Because if you're a small business, that's a direct impact to you. Because not only does your fuel go up, not only does your rent go up, not only does your mortgage go up, everything goes along with it, right? So in trying to tackle inflationary environments, you're actually making the problem worse, right? And that's the biggest thing.
Once the genie out of the bag, and we don't like the word genie, right? But inflation is a genie in an instance, right? You know what I'm saying, right? So once it's out of the bag, you can't put it back in the jar, right? It's out.
It's really tough, right?
Yeah.
And so in answer to your direct question is that most of those businesses are struggling, and a lot of them will fold, right?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the money that's flowing in the economy from COVID and all the money they gave away is, quickly, rapidly drying up, and everyone's really struggling at the moment with regards to that. And I think you'll find that people gravitate towards different opportunities. I had a client today literally called me and said, "I'm thinking about starting up some cleaning on the side." Total professional.
Someone just said here, a girl on OnlyFans is making $100,000 a month. You know the economy's upside down there.
Well, I mean, look, there was actually an article last week, which is a Vice Index, the Vice Index, which is Drugs and Stripper Index. So the strippers in the US and Australia are basically saying that things are drying up.
I heard about it. The strippers are going broke.
So it's actually now, since COVID, or actually since GFC, the Stripper Index, or the Vice Index, to make it sound better, is actually an economic measure, right? So they actually interview them and see how they're going, right? So all of those things are true. But you don't need to go that far. All you need to look at is how much Uber Eats you're doing.
Yeah.
How much, how much you're going out a night, on a weeknight, you're going twice.
Yeah.
Those type of things. So they're really small things. And so what is also interesting for our clients, or a lot of our clients that we share, is that they're kind of little businesses. Because they've got 4 properties, they're, maybe running a super fund, they're doing this, they're doing that, they're doing all these different things. And they're feeling the price rise every time a hot water breaks or whatever it is, because the guy who comes and fixes it says, hey, I'm really sorry, but last time I fixed it was $150.
Yeah.
Now it's $200, right?
Yeah.
And so everyone suffers in that unfortunate sort of circle. But what happens to the people who look at that and are really tactical about how they go? They're coming in early and going, actually, my rent's got to go up by $20 a week, because I know I'm going to get an extra $1,000 worth of price rises here, so I'm doing it that way.
$20 a week. I don't know who your property manager is, but I had to make sure that these broadcasts have been going out to the property management channel, right?
Yeah, right.
And I'm like, fuck, some of the things I say on there are a bit wild, right? It's like, hey, this isn't rude. Why are you saying that push up the rents? And they get a bit upset over there. But it's something that the levers that are there, the opportunities, a lot of people are faced with this adversity actually benefiting from, because they've got measures in place, they've got the right vehicles to be able to do so.
And look, we have a client who, I won't divulge the name, but they're in the position now that they're starting to downsize their property portfolio to achieve other aspects of life goals that they have, which they know they can't necessarily achieve retiring on government means, or even superannuation means, for example. And so the properties are being used to fund the lifestyle, because they're at a particular age where they go, you know what, I'm done.
YOLO.
Right? And so, exactly right. So you have to have properties that you control, assets you control, some sort of mechanism that you can control, which along the way will give you some tax benefits. So you can, instead of only getting $4,000 a year, because remember, if the tax brackets are broadening, and you can somehow sneak into a new tax bracket, and you drop quite a lot. And so if you've got tax mechanisms, whether it's negative gearing or properties or anything like that, which help you come down and reverse bracket creep, then you get more. So that $4,500 actually becomes more, and that's a fact.
Yeah.
So I think all those type of little endeavours that you have, and we see in clients, and we see that they come through on a daily basis. To be fair, they're not that worried about the budget, right? They're saying, okay, is there anything for me in terms of property investment? No. Keep moving.
There's nothing, there was nothing about new projects, no infrastructure around mining that I could benefit from all my mining.
No, there's a few infrastructure projects, but they're all
like some hydrogen. That's already anyway.
Yeah, there's all some very high level stuff that they've got going on.
So they've copied and pasted some part of
last year's budget.
Put an extra $5 on it, it sounds like it's a new incentive.
Yeah, right? Exactly right. And I think that's the problem, right? So they've got some rent increases for Commonwealth rent assistance, which is good for property owners, obviously.
So there you go. Like when we think about the rent assistance, right? These going up by 10%, right? So if they're paying $200 a week towards rent, they'll go up by $220 a week. So we're becoming recipients, right? I just signed off. It's the middle of the month. I've just signed off on everyone's rent. You might have seen in the middle of the thing, I was looking down at my trust account. My trust accountant was saying it's all uploaded, ready to sign off, tens of millions of dollars, right, to owners for their rent disbursements. Like that. If I think about the amount of money that flows through our trust accounts from the government to the government to the tenant to the owner. I'm probably the biggest Centrelink recipient in the country. You know what I'm saying? Our investors are. But those little things are all, as long as they're printing money, right, then that's going to find a home if you can be the one that has a bucket to catch the falling.
And look, that's the reality. I was mentioning before that clients who are getting government contracts and whatnot, contractors and engineers and this, that and the other, they're doing very well because the government's got these infrastructure projects, they've got the budget for it, you're sending
Yeah.
the checks and they're paying it. It's no different if you're a property owner
Yeah.
and, your tenant, is, partially government funded, right?
Yeah.
It's the same thing. So it was kind of in COVID is that you had wealthier suburbs and wealthier areas, they were having some vacancies, but the essential workers, quote unquote, they were holding strong because they were going, well, the government's not going to kick me out. So it's a mix and match of everything, right?
I just seen a comment here from Carmen, and it says here, can we use our super to purchase a home? And I'm going to touch on that with a big disclaimer that none of this is financial advice, but I will answer it for you because it is an important one to look at, right? Yes, you can buy a property with a super fund.
Not a home you can live in.
Not a home that you can live in. It needs to be an investment property, but yes, you can buy property in your super. I found that a lot of people have had strategies around buying and building property portfolios inside the super fund. Just for an example, if someone had $200,000 in their super fund, right, and they get a 5% return, if they get a 5% return, a lot of people don't look at all their fees and expenses that are coming out of there, and they're getting slugged a lot more than what goes in. But let's assume you did get 5% on 200 grand. Well, then that's a 10 grand increase for the year, right? But if you had 200 grand and you'd buy, say, 600 grand worth of property, then you would have a 600 grand asset base. If that went up by 5%, well, then it's gone up by 30 grand for the year. So there are benefits to and against a self-managed super fund. I've had a self-managed super fund for like 15 years now, as soon as they allowed it to happen. I remember when I quit my job, I put like 5 grand in my super, and I looked at the account a month later, and it was 5 grand less than what it was before I put the 5 grand in it. And I was like, what the fuck, what did I do that for, right? And it felt like a poker machine, right? And you don't know where your money's invested. You don't know who's got their grubby mitts into your super fund. Yeah, it's invested in the growth. Yes, it's invested into this, whatever the case might be. People think it's in Australian shares, whatever. But they're all derivatives of different types of financial instruments that are in there. So you need to be, I think if you've got 100 grand, 500 grand, 200 grand, whatever the amount is, you should have an understanding of where your money is at, who's got their grubby little mitts on your money, and no one has a better or more vested interest in your well-being than yourself. So you should be looking at all options and all opportunities to be able to expand that, especially in a time where we've got volatility out there, a lot of zombie companies, and I think we're going to start seeing big companies starting to fall. McDonald's, for example, I'm not going to say that they're falling, but
I've had a terrible couple of quarters.
Hey?
I've had a terrible couple of
quarters, very terrible. And the reason being is that their clients are so in a recession that they can't afford to pay the inflated. I said that we're going to have a hyperinflationary depression. If everyone's been watching for a long time, I actually said all those years ago, back in 2017, that when the GFD, the global financial depression hits, it will be a hyperinflationary depression. It will be that everything's gone up so much that people can't afford to live, right?
Yeah.
And it's just the world that we're living in. So if you are invested, if your super fund is invested into one of those sort of markets, then you could be in a very, your super fund could be a lot of risk moving forward. So I think,
without a doubt, I think it's probably what the best way to frame it is that the super that you have, although it's far away, is looking closer and closer as you get older, and that's the reality of. That's the reality of what you need to consider as a future self-funded person, where the government's age pension may or may not be there. As I mentioned before, America's social security system is under a lot of pressure. Even here in Australia, they're tapping into the super as an income source from a government point of view because it's so large. So you do need to take care of that. So I used to actually work in investment advisory. I'm not an investment advisor anymore, during the GFC. And we had people who were, following the budgets, doing everything, putting money into super, everything that was you're meant to do, and it was really good. The GFC hit, and their balances went from 750 or 650, it was good balance back then, to say 400. Took a big hit, right?
And then everyone felt happy 2 years later when it got back to 750, but the problem is that 750 from previously wouldn't buy what 750 would today. And if someone had 200 grand or 100 grand in their super in 2019 and it went down from 150 down to 100 and it went back to 150 or even 170, you'd be like, yeah, I've got all my money back. But the fact is that 150K, you could have bought a lot more shit with that going back 5 years ago.
Yeah, so it is important to consider that. So, Carmen, I think in answer to the broader part of your question, superannuation can be activated to purchase property, amongst other things, but you have to determine whether it's right for you or not, given your overall profile, balances, risk appetite, competency, all those different things are really important. So, yeah. But back to the budget, a couple of things for business and employers. I know there's a lot of people here who work for employers or work in businesses themselves. As I mentioned before, the $20,000 small business instant asset write-off has been extended. It's a bit of a disappointment because we thought it was going to be increased. There was discussions that it might go to 30,000, or like what it was during COVID time, that it might be uncapped, which was useful.
Very useful, folks. Very useful. Very useful.
And so,
when we have a crisis, there's no stop. So just throw shit at the wall and hope something's going to stick to fix it. And that's what we've seen. But they threw too much stuff to try and stave off the depression that we were meant to have back in 2019. But now they've really caused a bigger problem than what they would have had before 2019. And on the other side of this, we're going to have to do a lot to fix that problem. And I'm so excited to see what they'll be throwing. I can't wait till we start seeing, large financial institutions going under, big corporations going under, and, the level of stimulus and money printing that will go on at that point. Because then there will be it would be a fun budget at that point. It would be like a clown show.
So we haven't got to the clown show yet, but might come. Nathan's predictions have not been too bad.
We will see a clown show. Just remember, we've got the clowns already.
Yeah, they're already there. They're already waiting. So if you're in a business or you do have spend coming up, it doesn't apply to property owners. It doesn't apply to anyone else who's not in a small business or is not classified as small business anyway. You can spend $20,000. So if you bought, machinery, equipment, laptops, small cars, those type of things, they can be written off instantly as opposed to being depreciated over a number of years. And your accountants will be very well aware of that, given how it's gone for the last couple of years. There is a $325 energy relief for small businesses, so it doesn't make a huge difference. And as Nathan mentioned, some of those incentives are ones that you'll pay back in other ways because electricity prices, although they've capped or they've shrunk the increases, they'll continue to move up as inflation goes up.
I've just seen a message here that says, do you still believe there will be universal basic income in a few years? If we look at this, the $300, that's a universal basic income. That's a $300 gift to everyone. It's free money that's being printed out. It's a free chips and hamburger that's being printed out. So I think when we start seeing things go cashless, I think when we start seeing the next big crisis that comes out, they did universal basic income. They trialled it when they did
They're still trialling
the flood packages, when they did the flood grants, once they did the illness. If you're sick with the flu, you've got to stay home. You just push a button and you get $1,000 or $1,500 sent to you. I didn't even take any of that, right? I would have had it every week, right? Bang, bang, bang. So yeah, looking at it from that perspective, they've already trialled and it's been effective. Imagine what they're going to do once they want you to, like they're giving away a hamburger and chips to try and get you to sign up for something. They're giving away dining vouchers so you can go and sign up to a digital wallet or a digital identity by Service New South Wales, whatever incentives there were. So imagine what sort of incentives that they're going to do and roll out the red carpet when they want to try and third line force you to take up their cashless new currency that they're trying to install. They will pull it back in the future, but they'll get everyone used to it and they go, yeah, cool, exciting. And then they'll pull the rug like they are with Super Fund by capping it at $3 million. So that's fine.
Yeah, look, all of those things, depending on how deep you go down those rabbit holes, are all, partially or some have some root in some truth. I think the reality of it is that it would be very difficult, I think, to function without having some independent income outside of,
Oh, yeah, they won't give everyone Centrelink, but there'll be like a base of $500 for everyone or something
sure.
like that.
Yeah, maybe. I think that's true.
Yeah.
So again, there's a lot of dross here in this whole budget. There's some hydrogen production, tax incentives, funding measures for future, renewable resources and all that type of stuff, which will promote jobs and promote all other different stuff. But a lot of it is like $1 billion, 1.5 over 7 years, 10 years, 11 years. So things that they don't really have to be held accountable to. And so that's why it helps a little bit of a short term. It projects a few long term elements of there, but it doesn't really do a huge amount of immediate cost relief in other than what they're giving you, or forward planning cost relief. Okay, you know what, we're increasing the GST, gradually over the next 3 years to 15%, and that'll mean we can give you larger tax cuts later on, right? That type of stuff is logical in my head, and maybe while I'm not an economist, but I think it's a big miss, right? We're in a position where those type of taxes, appropriate taxes as opposed to individual taxes. I know GST is a regressive tax that taxes everyone, but you can stagger it. You can have luxury goods, you can have other bits and pieces which have GST attached to it for people who can afford it.
Well, they're doing that. They're making your car.
Luxury car tax, for example. Yeah, so that's a form of targeted tax collection.
Just on a note there, everyone's saying about hydrogen. It's a hydrogen I see on the page here. One thing I've noticed is that they're trying to get green energy grants, and a lot of people get scared of coal and coal towns and sort of infrastructure around that. I see a great lot of opportunity there. One, because coal is a very, very valuable asset. The world's going to be a much greater place when they eradicate it from Australia, UK, and US and New Zealand and anywhere under the Commonwealth, but every other part of the world is increasingly coal supply and coal manufacturing supply. And I think that the reliance upon that, and the reason why they're trying to push this green agenda, is to try and take us off the need of those other resources being produced and more of a control mechanism. But that's a separate story for another day. I don't want to digress there. But looking at the incentives that are going out there, they put a lot of these like stimulus, like everyone's going, oh, $300, yeah, I can go buy myself, half dozen massages, whatever, right? But when you look at a corporate, you've got a multinational billion-dollar companies that are mining companies and organisations and all the infrastructure. They've, like a lot of these mining organisations have invested in building their own railway networks, right? Their own shipping ports. I know I feed these companies people, right? I house them on a daily basis. I've got at any point 1,000 of their staff staying under my roof. 1,000 people a day staying under my roof. I feed them, I clothe them, we wash their linen, right? And I see the wash through of the resource infrastructure that they've got there. They ain't going to just walk away from this stuff. But the government come in and they give these organisations large amounts to try and diversify and put let's put some hydrogen over here. So when you look at that infrastructure, you've got people scared on one aspect, but the opportunity is there as well. And that's, I guess, why we went big on those infrastructure of mining resources over the last few years. But those markets are going stupid. Like, a suburb, an industry, a location where I actually bought the local real estate offices in the town. And with those local real estate offices, what was I going to say there? I forget what I was going to say.
The prices?
Yeah, I was looking at the prices of the properties the other day. I went on to the database and looked at what stock was there and whatever that's being sold in there. And the stock has gone up 100% in a year, right? The price went up by 100% in a year. And it's just interesting to see. Like, I don't think the value's there when they hit a certain point, but if it's below a certain point, it's below rebuild and it's like pennies in the dollar, then it's good. These locations will certainly benefit from
that.
Look,
without a doubt. I think, a lot of the budget measures are that, where they're pumping money to certain areas and certain activities and certain industries to be able to, hold water in a particular area or particular region. And it's good, but I think what they need to do is, it's a lot of tax incentives as opposed to taxing it appropriately, right? And that's the problem I think that we have.
Adam says he's curious about mining town investments. Example, Moranbah for coal, Weipa for bauxite. Seems cheap but risky. Look, in a lot of these locations, they are cheap, they are risky, and all that sort of stuff. One thing I saw with just when you wrote Moranbah, I haven't bought anything. I was actually going to buy a big motel there beforehand. I got one cheap. I've certainly got a lot of stuff around that region. So I'm not for it or saying go buy there or anything like that. But one thing I heard about Moranbah when I was doing research there many years ago was that there's two different types of coal, right? You've got your normal coal, there's different types of it. You've got the normal coal, and then you've got this one called choking coal, which is coke coal, they call it, right? And most people think coal is coal, or they're going to get rid of coal and all that sort of stuff. There is no substitute for coke coal. There is no substitute for that at all in the world, right? You can't build stainless steel without it. You can't have steel production, right? So you can have iron ore, but you can't have steel if you don't have the coke coal, right? So the coke coal is needed for the production of steel. And as we're advancing in the world, we need cars and solar panels and all these sorts of do that around our house. We need to have that steel. So in order to have that, you need to have the coke and coal. There's only a few locations. So when you look at places like Nuremberg, the talk of the town is that they are going to eventually have to take the whole town and mine the actual city centre of the town because there's not enough of that shit. So yeah, it's important to do your research and understand, how all the elements out there on the periodic table have their role in the world and what is needed for what is not. We'll talk about two periodic table elements last night, which they use for in the sky. But we won't go to that.
All right. Last couple of things that we'll go through is there's one for Nathan that particularly liked. There was an ATO. There's quite a lot of money actually dedicated to the ATO, dedicated to their funding, fraud, counter fraud, priority targets, etc., etc. Sure. But there was one here which you'd love. It's 155 million dedicated to identity checks. Nathan's a big fan of the government IDs, but yeah, look, so there's a lot more money, and it probably goes to what I've been saying for the last several years is that all this type of money that goes into the AI and the infrastructure and the information matching that they can do for taxpayers means that then people like me potentially will be out of a job where they just basically say, hey, Nathan, we know exactly how much you earned, how much rent you've earned, how much tolls you've done, etc., etc. Here's your tax return, take it or leave it, see you later, right? So I think a lot of that is aimed at that type of implementation targets that they have.
One thing I've taken very big note of, I have maybe 5 new bank accounts getting set up every week, right? Like I've got hundreds of companies, hundreds of entities, and different sort of bank accounts for all different things. And one thing I've realised is the actual coding in the back end of the bank. So the bank, for whatever industry you've got, for whatever sort of business you've got, they code it like a 514 or whatever. They've got codes at the back of the bank that which mean certain things. So when they see the transactions going to one of those accounts, they can sort of tie back as to what it would be. And looking at the cashless system that we're looking at the identity of it, this is just to have full, total, utter control over the human being, because there's no other alternative options for you to trade in. You've got to be strict conforming to comply with that system being stuck in the matrix. So there's a window there, an opportunity to be able to take control of your own personal position, but the walls are closing on you folks. So. Yeah,
look, I think all of the above is true to an extent, but I think it just positions and hardlines the reality, or underlines, I should say, that you need to have some level of independence away from any sort of reliance on these type of things. The taxes you can't escape, all those other different bits and pieces you can't really escape, but to be dependent on it, you can minimize your engagement with it. So, that's probably the most part of the budget. I'll go through a couple of key statistics which I thought which is useful for takeaway. So GDP real growth of 1.75% in 2023-2024 is expected to remain subdued at 2% going forward, and similarly subdued of 2.25% in 2025-2026. So they're not expecting any real movement growth. So what you're seeing is what you're going to get for the next couple of years, is basically what they're saying. They don't see any big receipts. Again, no changes in tax structures, no changes in collections that they're looking at. Basically, it's going to be business as usual. So if you're finding it tough now, there's no real reason why it's going to change according to the government stats. If the economy was really strong, then they would propose other things which would allow people to get more income, or they could put pressure on wage growth, etc., etc. The government expects inflation to be within target by the end of 2024. The RBA's most recent review has not aligned with that, and so there is a little bit of distinction now. So what the RBA is saying, what Treasury is saying, they're going to butt heads a little bit going forward. Global inflation is going to maintain an elevated status given the wars around the world that are going on. I don't think that's anticipating anytime soon. The unemployment rate has been close to its 50-year low, 3.8%, and the participation rate is at record highs of 66.6%. It's expected to rise but remain below pre-pandemic levels, so which is interesting to say, because at pre-pandemic levels, we were theoretically okay. Maybe the economy was bubbling along and then all sort of fell away. So I don't know if they're actually at pre-pandemic levels in terms of there's not enough jobs, because they should have created a lot more jobs and industries by now. But I'm not entirely sure how to come to that metric. Wage growth, which is a really important one for everyone, is pretty much just to stay a whole position. Over 2023, 2024, wages have grown at the fastest rates, still not enough for people to actually get ahead, but is expected to soften to 3.25% in 2024-25. Real wages are expected to actually pick up by only 0.5 in the year quarter to June 24. Business investment growth of 8.3% last year, which is pretty poor, I think, in terms of overall numbers for what it was or has been doing over the last couple of years, especially if you consider how much incentive they provided to the businesses over the last 4 years. It's just, I don't think it's really there, to be honest with you. So I think, look, the difficulties that we're going to continue to face globally are going to remain. I think the inflation is here to somewhat stay. As you said, it's hard to put it back in the bottle. And I think, given what the RBA said, who control the rates, it's probably going to be a situation where it's going to be much less going forward. So if you haven't done anything to now because you think that you're waiting for something to come, it's probably not going to come. So you probably have to take things into your own hands. And I think that's probably the best way in terms of call to actions. You can do whatever you can do in terms of being as tax efficient as possible, but tax is only a certain percentage of the problem. So I think it's always good just to underpin your overall position with other mechanisms.
Jimmy's not going to come to save you.
He'll give you $300.
He'll give you $300 towards it. So on that note, thanks a lot for sharing your insights.
No problems, and thank you for having me. And hopefully we can get together at the next mid-year budget update, which we're going to be doing pre-election, and that one will be maybe a bit more of a clown show, but we'll see.
Yeah. And on that note, like I did also think maybe we should get you back on to, maybe we can talk about, maybe we'll do a webinar based on what people can do. No financial advice, but
yeah, for sure. We can definitely do a tax update, super update, trust update. There's a few changes in that world, so yeah, for sure, it'd be good.
Beautiful. Thanks
Excellent.
a lot, Red.
Thanks
a lot
guys.
for everyone for tuning in, and for a second day in a row, backing up from yesterday for our Facebook Live. I was going to say Tuesday Night Live, but it's a Wednesday night and it's earlier. So thanks a lot for tuning in, folks. We'll catch up soon. If you do need help with anything, you do want to get connected with Ridhwan, do reach out to the team. There's a link in the description here. You can always call us 1300 367 925, email us at admin@B.Invested.com.au. We'll catch up shortly. Keep being awesome, and make sure you control yourself. You look for your own personal liberty and freedom as you navigate through the matrix, because it's a weird old world out there, and you need to take control of your own position. I think it's become more evident today than the last few years than ever before. So catch up soon. Thanks, guys.
See you later, guys. Take care.